Okay, I've been asked a lot of questions about the baggage door, about the flaps in the gear, about the certification, about the training. So I'm going to try to answer some of these questions. This is based on 40 years of flying. This is not particularly aimed at Mr. Biffle's plane crash pilot. It's not aimed at that. This is just 40 years of flying and flying these kind of planes. I don't know a lot about the Challenger. I don't know a lot about the Gulfstream. I don't know a lot about the Lear. I like the Citation. I have been studying it, flying it, learning it, looking at it for 40 years. That's my favorite plane. I like Citation jets. I like Corvettes. I stick with what I like, and that's what I like. Now, we are not going to know what happened till the NTSB report comes out in 18 months. Something's not right. There's something that we're missing that we don't know that's not right, because all of the way this happened just makes no sense. It makes absolute zero sense. But we can only go by what we know at this point. So we need to wait till the NTSB report comes out in 18 months. And then we're going to know. We're going to know everything. There's a way they can take that plane apart and look at the filament on the lights and get a lot of knowledge from that. That's why it takes so long. Now, is the NTB and NTSB and the FAA a bloated government bureaucracy? Yeah. You know, they're busy on vacation and going to conferences and, 45 days off every year paid, holidays off paid. So they're not going to do things quick. Anyway, we have to wait and see what comes out of that. Now, the Citation 2 is a great airplane as long as you keep up the maintenance and your pilot is trained. I looked up Mr. Biffle's plane, and I believe it was all original. The cockpit was original, which if it's an original, it's a safe plane. It's okay. It's just more work and more workload. Now, let me show you the difference here. This is a Citation 2, and I believe this is the original cockpit in his airplane. Great airplane, safe airplane. It's just more workload, especially for single pilot. Can you fly this plane safely, single pilot? Yes. Now, the Citation 5 is the same as the 2. It's just upgraded. Better wing, better fuselage, better avionics. See, now you're starting to get into the glass cockpit, and you have the FMS. The FMS is your friend. So, then you got the Bravo. Now look how much more automation there is with this in the glass cockpit. Now, this is the top of the line of the 500 series in small jets. The Encore Plus. Can you get single pilot for this? No. This is a two-man airplane. Single pilot, yes. Single pilot, yes. Single pilot, yes. Now, this is the 500 series. Now, this is the new model. I love Corvettes. If you get a restored Corvette from 1963 and you want it to be your daily driver and you want to drive from New York City to LA twice a year, you can do it. But you're going to have to stop, find a mechanic. We need a starter. We need an alternator. We need a battery. We need brake shoes. If you buy a brand new Corvette, it can be your daily driver and you can drive it to California 10 times. You're going to have very little maintenance. The new CJs have very little maintenance. It has the Rolls-Royce engine, the same engine that's in a cruise missile. It's 1,500 less moving parts. Now, this is the CJ3. It's just a step up. Now, when you get to the CJ4, that's the king of everybody. But when you start dealing with this FMS right here, this FMS does all your calculations. Your runway, can you take off? You put the weights, the winds, the temperature, and it tells you, yes, you can take off. No, you cannot take off. The pilot has to calculate the weight and the winds and the temperature. And he has to figure out, can I make it to V1, lose the engine, and stop on the runway without running off the end? He has to calculate, can I lose the engine and climb? So if you've got this FMS, it's going to do all that for you. If you're in this airplane, you got to pull the charts out and do that. Now, in an emergency, you got to pull the charts out and do that. In an emergency in this airplane, this is going to do that for you quicker, especially if you got a guy in the right seat doing this while you're flying. Now, if you have an emergency in this airplane, the pilot flies, the co-pilot pulls out the checklist, and he runs the checklist, and the pilot does the items. Now, if you're by yourself, you got to do that all by yourself. Your workload goes from 10% to 110%. So, that's that. Now, let's go back to the baggage door. I wish I had a picture of a Citation to show you the baggage door, but the baggage door has 2 safety clips, and it also has a lock. When you lock it, you can look at it and tell if it's locked. If the lock is key is straight up and down, it's locked. If it's like this, it's not locked. The pilot is responsible for making sure they're locked. After everybody gets loaded, you got to walk around that plane and check again that they're locked. And you take your hand and just bump it to make sure it's locked and it doesn't pop open. It's got 2 safety latches, and then it's got the lock. The aerodynamic wind is going to keep it shut most of the time anyway. Now, that's the pilot's responsibility to make sure they're locked. If you go out there and you're in a hurry and the owner's there and the owner says, I'll load the luggage and I'll make sure they're locked, you can't trust that. Most of the time, the Capitan is going to have the key to the airplane around his neck. Now, you don't start the airplane with a key, but the door key and the key to those locks, he's got that, and he should check that before we don't know if that's the cause. The NTSB said all the parts were there when they came to the plane crash. Now, the picture shows it's damaged. It probably got damaged when it hit the trees. So, but that might be what happened. We don't know that yet. It might come up in a couple of days that someone says, look, I found this in my yard. It's a suitcase, and it's a big piece of Kevlar. Well, they may find the door and some luggage in somebody's yard. I'm sure they have sent a drone over the flight path and checked for debris. So we don't know that yet. So the baggage door, that's the responsibility of the captain. You cannot trust the owner to load the airplane and lock those doors. That's not the owner's responsibility. That's yours. Now, when you get in the plane and you shut the door, you're going to see green lights. That means the door is shut. If you don't see the green lights, something is not shut on that door and the plane's not going to pressurize. Now, if it's a 2-pilot crew, one pilot shuts the door and the other pilot calls light out. That's what you do at flight safety. Light out means the door is secure and the plane can be pressurized. So there's a light on the dash that's white. When you shut the door or lock it, that light goes out and the captain calls light out. If you're in there by yourself, you got to do that by yourself. If you get in there and you sit down and you turn on that battery, if there's a baggage door unlocked, it's going to have a white light and it's going to say baggage door unlocked. So you're going to know on the ground if the baggage door is locked or unlocked. If you get in the plane and it's unlocked, you just get out and you go lock it. Now, can it still come open in flight? Yeah. They might have hit a bird. They might have hit a drone. They might have hit some rough weather. It just might have malfunctioned and came open. We don't know that, and we won't know that for a while. Can that down the plane? A rough running engine, an engine out is the same. It doesn't matter. Now, if a thrust reverser got deployed, man, that's tough. That's tough to deal with. But that might be what happened. I'm more so thinking that's what happened. But if that happened, you would be hearing lights and bells and horns and whistles in that cockpit. We heard the young man talking on the radio. We didn't hear nothing. If you're overspeeding in that airplane, you hear tick, 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 tick. They call it the coffee maker. The pilot says, well, the coffee's ready. You just pull your power back a hair and stay under that. If you don't have that gear down below a certain speed, you're going to hear gear, 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 or you're going to hear a horn, whoop, 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 whoop. If you don't have your gear and flaps configured to land, you're going to hear all kinds of horns, bells, and whistles. Now, more so on that glass cockpit than on the older airplane. Maybe some of that stuff wasn't working. We don't know. We don't know. So, the baggage door, it's a possibility. Now, the runway calculations, like I said, you got to figure, can this plane take off in this runway? Can it get to takeoff speed, lose the engine, and stop on the runway? That's the no-go speed. Can it climb on one engine in the weather conditions? Sometimes in Phoenix, Arizona, they shut Sky Harbor down because it's too hot. Nobody can take off. It's too much density altitude. In North Carolina, that's not the issue. But I'm looking at my notes over here. So, I think when he came around and put the gear down, he was going to land straight ahead. But they were not set up properly to land there. So he had to go around. Now, I don't know. Maybe he put the gear back up. I don't know. If you put the gear back up, leave the flaps alone, then you got enough energy and speed to make it all the way around. I think that he didn't bring that gear back up when he wanted to make that turn. Now, when you're making those turns, single engine with the flaps and the gear down, you're going to lose some altitude. So that might be a factor. So you got to think about that. Now, the engine and the windshield. Now, this is talking about a commercial airliner. That engine on a commercial airliner has to be certified. I think it's a 9-pound bird. It has to be able to ingest a 9-pound bird and still fly. The windshield, even on the Citation jet, I believe it's 7 pounds. It has to be able to hit a 7-pound bird at 250 knots and not bust that windshield. The reason the airspeed is 250 knots below 10,000 is because if you hit a big goose or a hawk or an eagle, you won't bust that windshield. Now, and it helps the controllers keep everybody at a better speed where they can kind of judge what's going on. So, now that little Cessna engine, he might have hit some birds. He might have hit a drone. I don't know. So we don't know that yet. But can the plane still fly on one engine? Yes. But I'm almost thinking it's mechanical and the engines weren't getting fuel. Maybe both engines were running rough. And maybe both engines were not producing power. That's the reason he came back so quick to land. We don't know. We won't know till the NTSB tells us. Now, the old avionics. I just showed you the avionics. The older avionics is a big workload. If you got the new avionics, it's less workload, even in an emergency situation. So that's why these planes, these older planes, you can take them and spend some money and redo all the avionics. And you can do that a lot of times cheaper than buying a new plane. Those new CJs are 2, 3, 4, 6, 8 million. When you can buy a Citation 2 for 300,000, put $1 million in it with engines and avionics, and you're at $1.3 million, and it's just as good. Is it going to be, if you're going to race from Dallas to LA in a CJ and a 2, The CJ's going to be there 30 minutes before you, but you're going to have $4 million more in your pocket. So these old airplanes are safe. The S2 is a wonderful, safe airplane if you do the maintenance and the pilot is well trained. Now, let's say your friend who's got his own jet, he's got a construction company, he's got a jet, and he wants to go the Telluride. Okay. Do you jump in and go, or do you say this? You ask nicely, wow, that's great. What year is the jet? Who does the maintenance? And if he says, well, we got a mechanic at the airport. He does all the maintenance, and he does the annual every year. Every year, if it's Part 91, you got to do an annual. Now, these older jets, they have progressive maintenance that has to be done. If he says, well, we got a guy at the airport that does everything, red flag, red flag, red flag. If he says, well, we take it to Orlando to the Cessna Service Center, and we leave it there, and they're going to fix everything. They're going to fix is it going to cost you money? Yeah. But they're going to fix everything, and it's going to be right. If you've got some guy at the local airport who's been working on 172s, and he works on it, I wouldn't do it. Because that airplane, it's a learning curve. I know a guy, I'm not going to say, but he's in the Memphis area. If you take a plane to him and say, it's making this noise, it's doing it, he'll go straight to it. He already knows exactly what it is. If you go to a young mechanic fresh out of flight school, he's going to spend 3 days in the computer and books trying to look up the problem. And you know what? He's going to charge you $100 an hour. So you're $3,000, $5,000 in before he even figures out the problem. Where you get these older guys, they know exactly what the problem is. Now, you go to the Citation Service Center. They fix the same problem 1,000,000 times. They got the parts, they got the mechanics, they got the tools. They're going to fix it. Is it going to cost you money? Yeah, but they're going to fix it. So who does the maintenance? You know, I think Mr. Biffle was on top of the maintenance. I don't think maintenance is an issue on that plane at all. Not at all. Because these NASCAR guys are meticulous, especially about maintenance. So I don't think it's a maintenance issue on that plane. But this is what you want to ask your friend that wants to go to Telluride. Wow, that's a nice plane. Who does the maintenance? If they say the guy at the local airport, if they say we send it to a certified Cessna Service Center and they do it. Then when you sell that plane and the new owner says, oh, this plane's 15 years old. Oh, you've got all the records. It's been to a Cessna Service Center for 15 years, every year for its annual. That's a good plane. If you get it and you look in the logbooks and it's got 5 different mechanics scribbling in there, Now, also, you're going to ask them, oh, wow, who's your pilot? Well, I got this young kid. He's got 1,000 hours fresh out of school. I don't have to pay him much. Or if he says, well, I got this guy. He's a retired airline pilot, and he's good. Now, oh, wow, where did he go to training? He went to the mom and pop school and did a 3-day course. I've got this old airline pilot. Where did he do his training? He went to flight safety. He did the 3-week full initial course. And after he got certified, he had to fly 10 hours with a certified pilot to certify him more. And every 6 months, he goes back to flight safety and he redoes everything. Or every year, he goes back to flight safety and he redoes everything like clockwork. He has a first-class medical, not a second class, a first-class medical. Every 6 months, my pilot goes and gets a first-class medical. Because of his age, he gets an EKG every year to make sure he's fit to fly. Now, that's the difference. Maintenance done good, maintenance done bad. Pilot trained good, pilot trained bad. That's what you got to think about. I don't know anything about Mr. Biffle's training or his maintenance. I would imagine both of them are top notch. Top notch. That would be my assumption. Something is not right about this crash. Something is not right. You know, is it the issue with the SIC license? It may be. But I'm thinking it was a control issue or just a malfunction with the fuel controls or something, you know. And he lost power in both engines maybe. We don't know. I got kind of a good idea, but let's wait and see what the NTSB report says. Now, that being said, the weather. A lot of companies that fly 135, and a 135 is like a taxi cab. You call them and you say, I want to go Memphis to LA, okay? There's 10,000 airplanes, small corporate jets all over the United States. And the broker looks on the board, he says, well, there's one in Little Rock, let's call them. Do you want a trip from Memphis to LA? They said, we can do the trip, it's going to be $12,000. They call the guy back and says it's $12,000. That company has very strict rules. Where it can go, where it can't go, the weather minimums taken off. Can they take off from a runway, and can they return to that runway? It's very strict. If you're Part 91 and you own that airplane, your rules are pretty lax. So, taking off in the weather he did was perfectly legal. It's every day. Every day. So, but before you go in those clouds, you have to be on an IFR flight plan, IFR airplane, and you have to be IFR certified, which I'm sure they were. I think things happened right after takeoff, and they didn't even get to that point. So, the weather plays a big issue. Now, like I said before, I think they were set up to land on the first approach to that runway, and they were out of position, so they had to do a downwind and come back around. I think maybe they didn't move the flaps back up, and they didn't move flaps back up to take off and approach from land, and they didn't bring the gear up, which made them lose a lot of energy and a lot of altitude and a lot of airspeed. Excuse me, especially if he makes that turn. If he makes that turn with the flaps to land and with the gear down, he's going to lose a lot of altitude. Now, the NTSB report is not always accurate, especially with the mountains around there. It's not set in gold. That's not always accurate. Now, the NTSB will look at all of those records, and they will eventually come out with a more accurate report. So these first news medias and reports and animations, that's going to get revised and trimmed down, and it's going to be more accurate once the NTSB looks at that. Now, the Citation history. It is a great airplane. You know why they got the name Citation? When the first jet came out, they were trying to think of a name. And one of the owners had a racehorse. His name was Citation. So that's how the name Citation was put on that airplane. If you look on the yoke of every Citation jet, there's a horseshoe. Why is there a horseshoe? Because the Citation was a racehorse. Now, let's look on here and let's see if we can see that horseshoe. Well, it ain't going to show. It's not showing the yoke. It's not showing it. So maybe that was on the newer airplanes. But anyway, that's the reason for the name Citation. It's the safest airplane in the sky. If you go on controller, there's more Citations for sale than any other plane. If you bought a Citation in 1990 for $975,000, today it's probably worth $1.5 million. The CJ4, I think it's a 2-year waiting list. And if you buy it and fly it for 500 hours, it's probably going to be worth more when you go to sell it. So the Citation history is a great airplane.
Now, people have said, we're going to get the cockpit recorder and the black box. That plane doesn't have a black box. It's not a 121 airline carrier. And did it have a cockpit voice recorder? Yes, it did, because it was once a 135 aircraft, which means it was basically used as a taxi cab. Was it on? Was it working? We don't know that. And usually it's on a 30-minute loop. So every 30 minutes, it erases the previous 30 minutes. Now, people said, maybe he turned it off. Pilots don't get in there and just start turning stuff like that off. It probably was inoperative, And maybe it's working. If it's working, it's going to be a big piece of the puzzle. So, the conclusion to this, the baggage door is the pilot's responsibility. Loading that luggage is the pilot's responsibility. Now, there's a limitation. I believe it's 200 pounds in the back. I believe there's 2 baggage doors in the front. It depends on the plane. I think the front one can take 200 pounds and the second one can take 300 pounds. Now, if you're going to go from Statesville to Sarasota, Florida, if you're going to have a fuel stop, which is what I would have done, I would have taken off light and I'd have made a fuel stop. Can you fill that plane up with fuel, 7 people and baggage? You're getting close, and make it to Sarasota, Florida. Maybe he knew that there was a good tailwind at 35,000 foot, so he didn't need as much fuel. Now, when you get up to 35,000 foot, you're going to look at the temperature and you're going to adjust the power levers to give you the best speed and conserve the least amount of fuel. If you got one of these owners in here that says, go, 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 fast, 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 full speed, full speed. Well, you're going to gain maybe another 20, 30 knots. But your fuel consumption, if you take your Corvette and you drive your brand new Corvette and you drive 50, 60, 70 miles an hour from LA to New York City, you might have to stop for fuel every couple of hours. If you're just gunning it and you're going, I had a Corvette. I had a 6. I bought a brand new one in 2018. If you drive it slow, it's good on gas. If you drive it everywhere you go, you're going to have to put gas in it every 45 minutes. So, we don't know that. We don't know. We haven't seen his flight. There's no way on this planet that man took off and didn't have a flight plan to go to Sarasota, Florida. I'll stake my newborn child on that. It would be insane to do that. I'm sure he had an eye for a flight plan. They didn't get that far in the flight. I mean, as soon as they took off, they had an issue. So, baggage door, perhaps. Bird in the engine, perhaps. I would have said it on the cockpit radio. Nobody hears it. I mean, you're not talking to a controller. That radio frequency is just a general frequency for the 5-mile radius around that airport to everybody else. If it's a clear sunny day and you're in Florida and you come to that airport, there's 10 airplanes at a flight school doing touch and goes. I've been in a plane before, flew 3 hours to Florida, and you get down to that airport. This is what happens. 20 miles out, the captain takes the radio for the controller. The FO takes the radio for that airport. And this is what he says on the radio. He says, Bodump, Florida Airport, citation 1234, 30 miles out, we will be landing, request airport advisory. And you're going to hear somebody say, well, we got 3 172s in the pattern. Oh my God, that's a red flag. So you got to plan for that. And when you're saying that, this 172's in the pattern, they got to listen to that and they got to say, look, there's a jet coming in. Let's be responsible and give way to him. He's tired. He's been flying 3 hours. His feet hurt. His knees hurt. His back hurts. He's got to pee. His passengers have got to pee. And he might be a little short on fuel. So let's be courteous and let him come in. Anytime you hear emergency helicopter 1. Clear out of the way and let that guy pass. He might have a heart transplant in there. He might have your grandmother in there. So that's what happens when that plane comes in. I would have broadcast on the radio. I would have done it as the captain. I'd have said, we've got an engine out. We've got a dual engine failure. We've got 2 engines out. We've got, if the baggage door was open, sometimes pilots don't want to say that because it's kind of embarrassing, I don't think that was it. I think maybe they hit a bird and they had an engine out. So we will see with the NTSB report. So cockpit voice recorder, the plane had it. Was it on? Was it working? I hope so, because that's going to tell us a lot. Because you can listen to the horns, the bells, the whistles of what's going on. And when the young man was talking on the radio, we didn't hear any horns, any warning horns or nothing, which that might be good information and might not be. I mean, everybody was kind of calm. So we won't know till the NTSB report comes out. So I tried to answer some questions about the avionics, the age of the plane, the baggage door, the weight. You can't let the owner go in there and load that. He's liable to put 20 bars of solid gold in the front. And if you don't catch that, that plane's going to be nose heavy and it's going to be ugly. If you're going full fuel, 7 people to Florida, you gotta ask them women, how much do you weigh? Don't lie to me. Don't tell me you're 90 pounds if you're 130 pounds, because 30 pounds can make the difference. That plane has a takeoff weight. It has a ramp weight. It can, let's say the takeoff weight is 14,800 pounds. The ramp weight might be 15,000 pounds. So you can burn 200 pounds worth of fuel before you take off and still be legal. Can you come back and land at that? In emergency, yeah. Is it best to do? No. Will it damage the airplane? Maybe. So that's some things you got to think about. Maybe he had a fuel stop and he was taking off with 3/4 of fuel to save weight. People think you buy this jet, put 10 people in it and 1,000 pounds of fuel and take off. No, you cannot do that. And people think, oh, it's a twin engine jet. You lose one engine, you just got another engine to keep going. No. When you lose an engine, you didn't lose 50% of your power. You've lost 75% of your power. And you've made a lot of drag, especially in a twin. Now, losing an engine in a jet is way different than in a twin airplane. Stalling in a jet is way different than in a twin or a small airplane. But that's a whole nother video. So, those are some questions I was asked. And I tried to answer them. You can't necessarily answer them online because it's not a 3-sentence answer. It might be a 30-minute answer. So if you have any questions, email me or put them in the comments and I'll try to answer. It's heartbreaking. I'm upset. I'm distressed about the situation. But it's just part of life, It's just part of life. I mean, it's we don't want to throw the pilot under the bus. We don't want to throw the owner under the bus. We don't want to throw the airplane under the bus. Let's wait till we get the information. Something is not right. There's a piece of the puzzle that we don't have. So let's wait till we have all the information. If you have a question, ask me. I'll try to help. Now, let me show you something else about this. Oh, I hope I don't mess up this. Now, you see these planes here? Now look at this here. This is the Caravan. Air start after flight. Flame out. Loss of fuel pressure. Fuel flow. Fuel control. Memory check. And the icing. All of that is right there. Now,
the boxed items, when I say boxed items, these have to be memorized in the simulator. When this emergency arrives, you got to know to do this immediately. Now, this is not boxed items. You get the checkout and do the checklist out and do that. Now let's flip this over here. Now here, it shows the flight profiles. You go to flight safety, you're going to be expected to have these memorized. You're going to be expected to have everything boxed, memorized. You're going to get, after you do your training, you're going to get an oral test. And they're going to quiz you on this stuff. These are everything red is emergency procedures. You're going to have this memorized cold. These have to be memorized cold. You got to be able to spit it out immediately. So for your oral test, and when you get in the airplane, you're going to have basically a 2-hour check ride. And you're going to do every one of these emergency procedures. You're going to do all of them. And if you can't pass it, they're not going to pass you. So it's easier to do those emergencies in this plane because it's so much more automated. When you get to these older airplanes, the workload is a lot higher. There's no FMS in this airplane. You're the FMS. When you start getting to this, with the FMS, it does these calculations for you. And a lot of times that calculation is going to already be in there. But if you got a co-pilot, he can do the calculations while you fly the plane. Like I said before, in a 2-pilot airplane, when you have an emergency, the captain flies, the co-pilot gets out the book and runs the checklist. The captain does the checklist while the co-pilot reads the checklist. So when you go to flight safety, you got to have this stuff memorized. Code, memory items have to be memorized. So that's another thing about training. Your best piece of equipment with your airplane. Maintenance, yeah, but a qualified, trained pilot that goes every 6 months. Now, if you got a new pilot from the airlines and he goes to flight safety, he's going to have to do the initial. He's going to have to do 2 weeks, 3 weeks, the whole enchilada. Once he passes, he doesn't have to do, he's going to have to pass that check ride to get his type rating to fly that plane. If he flies an Airbus A380, it's probably 3 months of training. He has to do a check ride. Now, an airline pilot, captain, every 6 months, he has to do that check ride. He is interviewing for his job every 6 months. He has to pass that medical every 6 months, which is a first-class medical, and he has to pass that check ride every 6 months. So, Part 91 in a small plane, he can fly with a second-class medical every year, and he's not required to do the EKG for his heart. After 50, you got to get an EKG once a year. So that's a little bit more knowledge on that. I mean, you want your pilot to go to flight safety. It's rigorous training. Now, once he does the initial and gets the type rating in that plane, the insurance might require him to go back for recurrent. Recurrent is 3 days, maybe 5 days. It's not as much. And it's great. I mean, because you're going to forget some things. You're going to learn some new things. So recurrent is not as expensive. A captain at the airlines, he does the whole enchilada every 6 months. The co-pilot does the whole enchilada every year. Part 91, mom and pop school, I'm not even going to say it. But if your captain is sent to flight safety, he's going to have to know those memory items and know those procedures. He's going to have them memorized. So that's the difference. I'd stick with flight safety. I'd just go there. I'd send everybody there. So some questions were asked me.
I tried to answer them. 99.9% of the comments are positive. You're gonna have some trolls and some people like that. You know, you're gonna have that. You know, that's just part of it. So I hope this is helpful. I try to answer your questions. If you have any more questions, send me an email, call me on the phone, leave it in the comments, and I'll write it down and try to answer it as accurately as I can. So that is update number 4. Thanks.